Amen. Okay, we got Jeremiah 23 finished at least. This is a big blessing to me because you know what? When I first started teaching, I had the misfortune, I guess, of assuming that there was a right way to do this structure-wise. In other words, I thought you had to fit it all into 1 hour, one teaching, or I thought that it had to be all in your notes or whatever it had to be. And I love the freedom to just go where it goes. And I hope that it's blessing you as well. Okay? And so I just stop wherever he lets me stop. I look at the clock and that's where we stop. And that's great. I think that's really good. And I find that very freeing in terms of allowing it to really be as thorough as he wants it to go and then move on when he's ready. And so that's really great. I'm excited about that. Okay. This is the part that we call the Afterburn. And so you have comments or questions, you're welcome to go ahead and raise your hand. Austin's going to come up and grab the mic. If you grab the one on the right, that's the one I think they normally turn on for that. Okay? And so if you have comments or questions here, raise your hand. If you're on live stream, we've got Nate and Kurt manning the live stream, and they will share your questions over the mic when the mic gets to them. Please keep your comments and questions to, if you can, today's teaching, if not to at least the covenant idea that we're talking about for the last 29 teachings, okay? So we're already over half a year in this thing, okay? 29 parts, that's over half a year already, okay? So that's, wow, it's a lot of stuff, okay? So I think we'll probably get in another 20-something parts and we'll get this thing really fleshed out because we're still in Proverbs 5, really, even though we're jumping around, but we're still really in Proverbs 5. And we've got a lot more to deal with in Proverbs 5. So we're going to begin and start with Michelle.
Okay, Jeremiah 23:34, when he talks about the false prophets, priests, teachers, and whatnot. Mm-hmm. And he says he'll punish that man and his house. Who is his house? Is that just like literally his house family, or is that his congregation or followers?
What verse are you in?
34.
Oh, 34. As the prophet, the priest, and the people who say the message, I shall punish that man and his house. Okay, so he's trying to let you know that it's not just on you, but the punishment is also going to go on those that you had a covering over, that you had authority over. So that could mean family. That could mean extended family or congregation. So that's still, he doesn't make it that clear, but I'm thinking it could be those that you were responsible for. All right, are going to suffer. He's warning them, you have responsibility. They are going to follow you, which they're supposed to find teachers to follow, but if you lead them wrong, you have that double judgment. And they're going to suffer for it. But they're also going to suffer because they may have blindly followed, or they may have sought an ear tickler, or they may have, so there's a punishment that goes on them too. Okay? Okay.
I just wanted to say thank you, Rabbi, for the teaching. It was very refreshing, and it reminded me of a situation where I've said this before, but I used to be one of those people that thought, people in the mainstream were covenant just confused or whatever, and it became crystal clear to me that they weren't when one particular man was basically saying that even though he knew what was written in Scripture and he called himself Messianic, tongue-in-cheek, he still would say that he could bring a Christmas tree in his house because he had felt like the Ruach had told him that he could. And it was like, no, the Ruach and the Word are not going to be in disagreement. I'm sorry. That does it for me. I can't.
Right. I mean, look, the experience that I had that was very crystal, like this was actually literally happening. I was invited to speak down in Georgia, just north of Atlanta, years ago. And the group liked to have me come in and talk. Okay, it's on like a weekday night. But they also liked these people they thought were very mature believers, blah, blah, blah. They were almost all mainstream Christian guys. And I heard the guy basically get up there and in doing all of this, as far as he called the people to understand that within the church is the Apostate Church. No, the entire church is apostate. They don't know it. They don't see it. But he was trying to make the case that, no, there are good Christians who are doing things right without Torah. And then there are the bad Christians who are doing things wrong also without Torah. But because they want to try to justify that there is a group that's wrong, it's just not us. Okay? Wherever you are, there's a group that's wrong, it's just not us. That's kind of the mindset that people fall into. Not recognizing that the entire group is actually in a place that's not right. Now, not necessarily to any fault of their own. I don't know how much fault is whose and what's. That's his problem, his issue. It's above my pay grade, right? Okay? But I watched and listened to this guy. I'm thinking, what in the world are you talking about? That's not, you're giving people that false sense of I'm in the right place and I'm okay when they're not. And that's the biggest problem. Why, Rabbi, do you have such a problem with the church? Because they are making people feel they're in the right place and okay when they're not. That's the only reason that I have a problem with it. It's giving them that false sense of I'm good, I'm where I'm supposed to be, I'm in the truth. That bothers me because I end up having to go to a, almost like taking people through an intervention detox or something when they finally come out and their heads are all screwed on wrong because all the years of indoctrination and being well churched. And so that's a lot of work. And this is a problem, okay? It's a big problem.
Janet Hoffman asked a question. Says, Rabbi, we're thankful you're our leader, our prophet. We realize how serious your role is to the Almighty. How can we support your role other than just praying for you?
If you want to support, the same thing, obviously praying for it, but also showing people what it looks like to be in structure. Because there are people that are not comfortable and they need to hear the testimonies of those of you that have tasted of it and tried it and found it to be what you found it to be, as opposed to what people are assuming it would be, okay? Because some of you only hear this when I'm back behind this lectern and blasting away. You have no idea what I'm like one-on-one. And the heart, the compassion, the patience, the threats to beat up. I'm sorry, that was just a separate thing, okay? But the other side of it, okay? You need to talk to people to find out when they came, did I make them actually feel safe? Okay? And there are people that have been very unsafe in their experiences who can tell you that they were not believing that it would be this way. They were pretty confident it wouldn't, but then they sat down and realized, oh, he's not just going to blast away. I have to read the word the way it's written to the big audience. When I'm dealing with your personal, private thing, then I have to deal with you as an individual person. And I have to gauge how you should be handled and what way to talk to you. I'm not going to water it down and tickle your ear, but there's a different tone. I may get real in somebody's face who needs that. I may be really super gentle who needs that. It's about working with that person. And I believe the Ruach has helped me use that discernment most of the time to guess correctly when I'm working with people, okay? But you got to try it. So Janet, since you and Janet and her family have sat with me and we have talked, you guys are the most useful. Because people just think when I say it, I just want everybody under me for I'm a power crazy dictator or something. But it's you guys who have experienced can tell people this has been my experience, and you can make the difference in the decisions other people make about this ministry because you have tasted of it, and you can tell them, I've talked to him, I've had issues, I've had problems. He's been kind of frustrated with me, but this is how that went or whatever it is. All right? So you can bring that truth and reality to it. Now, by the way, if you're talking to somebody who's claiming that, be careful that you don't go by just one witness, because you may have gotten somebody who just didn't like what I said, and they will paint it in a whole different light. I can give you an example. Back in the day, I was talking to somebody in council. This is years ago. Robert was sitting 8 feet from me in the same office. It was on speakerphone because we were together working with this person. I didn't give the person what they wanted. I talked very softly and very gently the whole time. On Facebook, it came out that I yelled and screamed at her. Never happened. Good thing I had Robert listening and he was the witness. Okay, by the way, he wasn't just listening in on it. He was part of the conversation, but Do you see how that can happen? Don't just go by one person, what they say. But you can be that person that says, I've been there, I've done this, and I would encourage you. Now, you'll know the difference. The person encouraging you to run away without tasting for yourself, don't listen to that person. The person encouraging you to give it a try and see for yourself, listen to that person. Because you need to validate it for yourself and not just be listening to and believing whatever person you feel like believing. Because they may have their own agendas. I would find a person encouraging you to say, look, this was my experience. You need to try this for yourself. I would give them more validity than the person telling you to run. And go get multiple witnesses. Is that fair? Does that make sense? Okay, and of course, please keep us in prayer. Because trust me, the more we reach people, the more there's a giant bullseye and people are attacking. Okay? And it's not going to stop, and I'm okay with that. It's the job. Okay? All right, next question.
All right, Lance Williams asks, Jeremiah 23:30, the prophet who steals from his neighbor, would that be the same as the wicked one in Matthew 13:19, which causes it to fall by the wayside?
It functions the same, okay? It would function in a similar way, okay? A person who's giving in to that enemy's influence can cause that result. So I don't think it's necessarily talking about the same thing. Matthew 13 is specifically talking about the enemy. But we can be an extension of that enemy if we're buying into that influence. Okay, it's a good question. Appreciate that. Okay?
All right, Crystal McGee, could Jeremiah 23 verse 40 be indicating an everlasting shame as going beyond death? Their actions will be remembered beyond death as a teaching tool.
Yes, it could absolutely do that, which basically matches up also with Matthew, when Matthew says that there are those who will be first and last in the kingdom. Those who teach people to break the Torah will be considered the least. Well, not because they'll be in the kingdom, but when they're being talked about, they say, do you want to know what the lowest people are? Those guys who were teaching people to break the commandments. And those who will be the greatest are those who taught them to keep the covenant, keep the commandments. So yes, I think there might be an ongoing, just like there's an ongoing right now. We read in the scripture some people that did some pretty shameful, dumb things that were, brought reproach on their reputation forever in this book. And we know about those people like Korach. We're going to read about that in an upcoming Torah portion. Korach is going to have his name basically connected with very shameful things. Rebellion. Korach and rebellion go together, don't they? So his name is now linked to that forever. Judas. All I have to do is to say Judas, and you already know. There's the shame that's connected to that. All right, go ahead. Next question.
All right, from Nick Goddard. Could Rabbi reconcile Ezekiel 22, verse 26, and Matthew 12, 5 through 8? Particularly 12:5, what is Yeshua referencing? I've heard Christians use this just by breaking Shabbat. So Matthew 12, 5 through 8.
Matthew 12.
Correct.
Okay, so in Ezekiel, we're talking about not separating the set apart from the profane, and the difference between the unclean and the clean. And in Matthew 12, it's saying that, or did you not read in the Torah that on the Sabbath, the priests in the set apart place profane the Sabbath and are blameless? So it's not that they profane the Sabbath. They do something that you would normally think would be profaning it, but because it's actually commanded of Yahweh, it's not profaning it. In other words, that's a confusion here, but people don't understand what actually is profane and what's not profane. Because people have the understanding that you can't do anything that is physical effort on Shabbat, because that would be profaning the Sabbath. Well, that's not exactly true. The priests are doing that all day on Sabbath, doing all the sacrifices required, etc. That's a Sabbath thing. And so, no, that effort is not the thing, and we talk about that in the Sabbath teaching, okay? The new one that's 3 parts or whatever it is? That teaching, we get into that in more detail. Look, how many days did they go around Jericho? 7? Does that mean that one of them was a Sabbath? I don't see how your math could work any other way. So they literally marched around a city on a Sabbath. Did that profane the Sabbath? No. If you do what Yahweh said on his set apart time, you are not profaning it. He had them leave Egypt on a holy day. Right? First day of unleavened bread, they're leaving Egypt. That's a lot of work. Pack everything up and leave. And so it's about setting it apart. What does set apart mean? See, now we have to define things. Profane means that it's being used for something that Yahweh hadn't meant it to be used for, perverting it, twisting, etc. What does set apart mean? That it's being used for exactly what he intended. And so if it's his intent, we're submitting on Sabbath to him completely. We're taking a whole day off to just make sure we're doing what he wants us to do. Now, we don't have him now actually dictating things like go around a city 7 times. We just read his word, we take the time off, we have the Mikra Kodesh, we have the set-apart gathering. Because I've had people say, well, we had to move some tables around and that's work and we're breaking the Sabbath. No, it's not. It's not about the actual physical exertion. It's about being here, not being at your job. It's about being where he is, hearing the word, fellowshipping together, having that gathering, taking the 24 hours and putting it to focus on him. Hopefully that answered the question. Okay? But yes, you're right. There are people that would use Matthew 12:5 to say that they could break the Sabbath. All right? Well, wait, hold on. Let's go back to Matthew 12 for a second. What are the rules of context? Come on. Who's speaking? Who's the audience? What's going on? What's the issue? All right, so what is going on before we get to verse 5? I don't know. How about verse 1? At that time, Yeshua went through the grain fields on the Sabbath, and his taught ones were hungry, and they began to pluck heads of grain to eat. Now, are they harvesting? No. They're taking, it's like if you went through an orchard and there was an apple tree and you reached up and grabbed one and you ate that apple because you were hungry. You don't have a bushel bag with you and a basket or whatever, and you're not picking them all up and you're putting them in and harvesting. So the issue is they're being accused by who? The Pharisees, who are trying to catch Yeshua in law breaking. Well, by the way, if the law was done away with, why didn't he just finally say to the Pharisees, they don't need to do this? He didn't say that. He's saying your understanding of the law is not correct. The Pharisees saw it. They said to him, look, your taught ones are doing what is not right to do on the Sabbath. And he's saying, that's not true. You guys came up with that rule. It's in the Talmud. It's in the list of 39 things you can't do on Shabbat. It's a Talmudic thing. He said, no, that's a man-made rule fence that you can't go in a field where there's grain and pluck something and eat it. Doesn't say that anywhere in the Torah. But he said to them, have you not read what David did when he was hungry? Have you not, and it goes again with the Sabbaths and profane. But he says profane, he's saying according to the way you're describing it, they would be profaning it. But it's not profaning because the Torah never said such a thing. You see how context is important. Yeshua's talking. Who's he talking to? A Pharisee and an audience watching the discussion. And so when he's using the word profane, he's using the Pharisees' definition. He's saying, well, according to you, the priests are profaning the Sabbath when they do these things. How can that be? How can a priest who's doing what Yahweh commanded be actually profaning something Yahweh commanded? So that's what Yeshua is trying to straighten that mess out. Okay, next question.
All right, Ed Ruiz, is anyone who says Yahweh told me the same as Jeremiah 23:38, where it says the message of Yahweh making themselves like a prophet?
No, look, I don't want to get you into the judge's seat. Stop, don't do that. Don't feel like somehow you now need to, come to a judgment when anybody does anything. Just worry about you and your plank. I would recommend that you be very cautious and reluctant to say those words. I had a lady, I told you the story all the time, in Knoxville, used to come up every week. Father told me to tell you. Yahweh told me to tell you. Yahweh told me. It's like, enough already. Yahweh told me to tell you. He has my number. Okay? And so, but I would be very reluctant. Now, if other people are doing it, your job is to do what? To decide what to do with what they say or whether you listen to them, not to worry about whether that means they're the person talked about in Jeremiah. I don't know. You don't know. Maybe Yahweh really did tell them. You have a choice to listen or not listen, and then apply it to the test of Torah, and is it leading you more towards Yahweh or away? Now be careful with that, because you may feel it's leading you towards Yahweh. Is it leading you towards Yahweh or the image of Yahweh you want Yahweh to be? Ooh. Are they leading you towards Yahweh as he is, or the version of him that's in your head that you want to believe him to be? Ooh, be careful with that. Mic drop. Okay? That's where you get in trouble, because people say, oh, well, I really believed he was leading me to Yahweh. No, the Yahweh version that you want him to be in your head, or the real Yahweh? What he really says, or what you'd like it to say? Or what it really means, or what you'd like it to mean? That's the ear-tickling problem. You're looking for someone who's going to interpret it to match you. So you look. That's why people listen to, when you're looking for something, you may listen to 6, 7, 8, 12 different teachers on that subject on YouTube trying to find what? The one you like. Not the one that's right. You're looking for the one that you like. Now, you think you're looking for the one that's right, but the filter you're using is whether you like what they say. Because you think the Ruach is going to help you discern that it's right. And so if you like it, it must be the right one. Well, I didn't like that because that's not the right one. Be careful with all of that. You have to be aware that your worst enemy and biggest issue is you filtering the information through you, through the the preferences. Be careful of how your preferences and your desires for wanting it to be a certain way, or you're hoping it'll be a certain way, or is going to affect your ability to discern things correctly. I can't tell you how many people have listened to the teaching I did on divorce, putting away, and remarriage and putting away, whatever the name of it was, who cannot understand a word I'm saying because they cannot get past their preference and their filters of the indoctrination, so they're not even hearing me. It's not that they disagree. They're not even, that when they quote back what I said, they'll say to me, well, what about this verse? I'm like, I spent a half an hour on that verse. So they're not telling me they disagree. They couldn't even receive the information because they're so wrapped up in their preferences and their indoctrination that they weren't even aware that I actually covered that verse, because it's usually one of those one in Matthew or whatever that I did like 30 minutes on. And they'll still say to me, yeah, but I don't know what to do because I know God hates divorce. If you listen to the teaching, you have to know I taught completely opposite that he hates putting away, that divorce is a whole different issue. It's translated wrong out of the Greek, it's translated wrong out of the Hebrew, it's an English translation, it's a Christianity problem, whatever. I'm just saying it's the preferences, though, that are filtering and that people cannot hear through it's cognitive dissonance, if you even know what that means. All that noise in your head that prevents you from hearing things correctly. Okay? All right, Nate, go ahead.
I had a friend approach me about, they caught the MTOI live stream last week, and they were like, wow, what a great teaching. I was like, yes, I know he's my rabbi, it's great. And he said, and then somehow it got around to the point of, well, I'm looking for a teacher. And I said, well, I think this would be a great teacher. Go and listen to some of the teachings other than what you've heard. And then it got around to, well, I'm looking for a teacher who will basically agree with what I've learned in my doctrine. And I had to think, and I sent back a and they were like, well, what do you mean? I was like, well, I would like to find a teacher who is actually teaching the word without any holes in it, rather than looking for something that's going to agree with me. And so I sent them to one of the points that they had was about the Trinity. So I sent them to, do you know the Father and the Son teaching? And after they listened to the first one, they had already kind of gotten some kind of a perspective, and I know their background. So I was like, you can't get a full understanding of what he's trying to say with 1/11 of the teaching. You need to listen to the whole teaching and then come to a conclusion, and then maybe we can discuss it. But
Amen.
So I don't know where they went with that, but I really appreciated it, and it was. I hope that person is still continuing with the teaching and continuing to follow.
But that's a universal problem when I say it's like common, very all over the place. I mean, I remember, and I've told this story, but I was at a congregation down in Georgia, a different one that I mentioned earlier, where they were thinking of having me maybe become their teacher. This is years ago. And there's a lady that waited till the very end to ask me a lot of questions. And ultimately the problem was she wanted to see if I lined up with her before she decided to come and join this congregation. And I'm like, why do you care if I line up with you? You should want me to line up with the book, not with you, okay? But she wanted to see if I lined up with her so she can come to a place that she's comfortable, is going to teach her what she wants to hear the way she wants it. And I told her that that place ends up alone in her living room, and she got mad at me. Well, I told her, please don't get offended, but if that's the criteria you're going to use to find a place where the people have to match up with you and agree with you, you're going to end up alone in your living room because nobody's going to agree with you 100%. Okay? And so she got mad. It is what it is. So I went home and I cried and, So, but it's the foolishness of the self-driving that, don't let the I drive. The me, I on it my way, I don't like I this and that. So I only want to go to a place where everything agrees with me. Fine, start your own congregation. I mean, if that's so important to you, you grab a mic and tell everybody your way. Okay? And I promise you, you have no idea how hard this job is if this is all you see. All right? You don't know. You just don't.